Everyone to our afternoon session, continuation of our conference, topic on trade development, environmental nexus. There will be a slight change in order of presentations due to our organizational things. So I suggest we'll start first with our colleague Attila Nagy, then we'll continue with Professor Luigi Crema, then with Tariq Khan via Zoom, and then with Professor Olani Olainka via Zoom. Is this okay? Great, so thank you. So we start with our first afternoon speaker, Mr. Attila Nagy, who is PhD candidate from the University of Vienna. He has a very extensive experience in research, in environmental issues, sustainable development, the rule of law, democratization. So we will have a very good opportunity to engage with him. Also very extensive academic experience coming from first from Subotica, Serbia, Vojvodina, then moving to Hungary, then to Germany. So it will be also very interesting to hear from his experience. If we get this opportunity, and of course he has a very interesting topic on BRICS, comparison between BRICS, RISE and the Belt and Road Initiative, trading blocks. So it will be also very interesting, very important, very strategic topic that we will learn from him. And then we'll continue according to this rearranged order of speakers and presentations in the afternoon. So Attila, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the invitation and having me here. Even I was surprised how much experience I have. So I am a bit too young. Yeah. So I worked for many years as a lecturer. So I gained some experience and then ended up now doing hopefully finishing my studies. So I'm gonna do the technical stuff of share screening, and it's gonna be start a PowerPoint. Start my PowerPoint. You want to do that? Yes. Perfect. Thank you. So it was supposed to be open. Yeah, but I mean. Yeah, so what I'm trying to do, combine more things, which actually end up then being very interesting and strategic, of having various interests intercombined to this BRICS Belt and Road Initiative. Although overall I'm focusing on the post-conflict societies and their development, right, on their influence of these bigger stakeholders. So the bigger stakeholders I'm focusing on are of course the UN Security Council member states, which are having different agenda. And now the war in Ukraine, we obviously see that it's a very, very different agenda. And we see these blocs which have been formed like many years, half a century ago, they are still persistent and active today. So yeah, this is something what's going to be found in my presentation. So much post-conflict construction has focused on re-establishing macroeconomic structures. However, this often enhances corruption of elites and does not benefit the wider society, right? For this reason, it's important to support microeconomic structures, but I brought this up as an introduction, but it's also a conclusion of these things, because we are focusing on macro structures. Why we are focusing? Because we see that it's more like on the end, legal and political interest of and possibility in international law, of course. So I'm bringing up this map just so you see that we're dealing with the region of the Balkans of Kosovo, which is a small little dot. I cannot now show you. It's just middle of Serbia. And another conflict I'm going to deal with is the one in the Caucasus. You see, I hope you know. So it's just east from Turkey, and it's very important because Turkey, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia are now discussing and probably becoming. They don't even need to become part of the BRICS network because they're already cooperating, and then knowing how Turkey is getting close, he's close to Russia, being a NATO member country. It's an interesting, right? It's an interesting case of trade. And of course, here on this map, it's not visible the Asian continent where China has its Belt and Road Initiative, which ultimately ends in Serbia as being the biggest receiver of funds and investments coming from China, and of course the neighboring. We're here neighboring Croatia and so on and so forth. So we see really how on the EU neighborhood and EU, this influence is visible as well. So the first agreement, I'm dealing with this soft law kind of an agreement, which are not really in a form of an international agreement. So they are not really, there is no institution which can enforce them in any sense. So this one is the Brussels Agreement. It was reached in 2013 between the governments of Serbia and Kosovo. I'm just trying to, this is just the beginning to outline the most important thing. It was in effect, and they have interesting names because it says first agreement of principles governing the normalization of relations. But of course, there are other things, and I'm going to focus on this presentation. I'm going to focus on mostly on economic ones, environmental, economic, trade, and of course, energy and broader. So one of the first and important things is that it's supposed to establish an association community of Serbian municipalities. Of course, this hasn't happened, and we have a conflict again down there. And yeah, it's an interesting situation. Not a war, not a proper war yet, but yeah, it's an interesting situation between the two governments and the US and the EU, which is now preparing sanctions for Kosovo. It's an interesting thing to follow up if you have time, of course. Otherwise, it's just an endless circle of accusations and everything, right? So apart from this association community, which can be also seen as a kind of an autonomy, we'll have full overview of the areas of economic development, right? So this is outlined, and then it goes education, health, urban and rural planning. So economic development. Why economic development is important? Because every autonomy, not just in Europe, not just in Spain, not just in Nagorno-Karabakh, they want to have some kind of economic self-sustained thing, and this is of course support. So in the sense of Kosovo, this is of course the huge support which they're gaining from the US, and of course when it comes to Serbia, we will see later. Of course, I have evidence, right? So we have this huge support of China together with Russia, and it's very interesting to observe how intercombined they are supporting, and they're not selfish at all, right? They are making some big projects. So this is just to outline that all these agreements are not enforceable because they are soft law agreements. They are something which cannot be considered as international law, as part of an international law. But as we know, soft law is also some kind of a part of international law. And this is the form. It's very hard to work with these agreements because they're very soft law informal. So this is how it looks like. It says economic normalization, but this one is the Washington agreement. I'll jump over to this one in a second. So this is another one, the Washington agreement coming from the US. It was done in 2020. It's an era of President Trump, who has done this just before the elections, and it's very interesting because in this sense, US is still supporting this agreement in this kind of a separation of powers. The most important thing, which is not environmentally connected to environment, but it's kind of more of business, politics, and everything interconnected. And it says the relocation of the Serbian embassy to Jerusalem and the mutual recognition between Israel and Kosovo, right? So we see that a non-recognized entity by Israel and the big supporter, it's recognizing an entity. Why? Because of course they have some kind of interest, right? They are somehow pushed into this kind of relationship. This is coming as a broader US policy towards Israel and its neighbors, the Abrahamic Accords, when it's trying to get pacified. Okay, I'm not going to continue on this one anyway because it's getting too political. The more important thing when we try to dive deeper, it's the Kosovo, and there's a very important lake as a source of energy, of course, and they couldn't agree about this lake. This was captured and recaptured. So it's as a water source, it's a very important thing in post-conflict development as well. It's connected to pretty much each and every conflict, because the water sources can be scarce, and they're becoming scarce even when we are having the summer approaching to us. So they have tried to somehow make an agreement about this water source because it's pretty much covering the needs of water, right? And then of course a big energy producers, the power plants in Kosovo, so at least securing this water. So one of the most important things is that this agreement is securing this water for Kosovo, right? And in order like this achievement, this water source, you see it's an accumulation, it was renamed as Lake Trump, right? In order, but this was now removed because politics are changing in the Balkans very, very quickly. So the two most important things in regard the economy is to, according to Washington Agreement, is to diversify energy supplies. What does it mean to diversify energy supplies? That means that Serbia is absolutely dominated by Russian energy. although there are sanctions on Russian energy in Europe overall. Serbia is not joining them. And to make, of course, it's not just Serbia who is the biggest buyer, is the whole Europe. They want to somehow make Europe itself more energy independent from Russia. Is it going to happen? It's very, very hard to achieve. And one of the most important things is that in this regard, European Union is cooperating with Azerbaijan. And I'll jump later on to see that Azerbaijan is then, of course, cooperating with Russia and dependent on the Russian strategic energy supplies to Europe, which are then traveling through the Black Sea, which is now kind of a war zone and not a secure thing. And we will see how this is gonna finish, because Turkey is joining Russian efforts. So yeah, an interesting thing. Another thing which is now more connected to the BRICS and to more connected to this World Trade Organization things is the mini Schengen. This is something what has been changed. So this is the CEFTA organization. I don't know if you're aware of this Central European Free Trade Agreement, which has developed even once had its Slovenia as its member once a long time ago, probably. So it's Central European, but it also has, apart from the 6 Balkan countries, it also has Moldova. So Moldova is an interesting example, of course, cooperating with EU, but we'll try to look at it overall in the EU interests. So EU has probably bigger interest in the Western Balkans and joining Western Balkans than Moldova, which is again bordering Ukraine. So at one moment, this CEFTA is becoming a mini Schengen, of course, excluding Moldova, and then this is now becoming an open Balkan. So this is an initiative which is pretty much the same as EU. It has free movement of goods, free movement of persons. This hasn't been fully achieved. And again, there are obstacles to this. And one of the biggest obstacles is that there are 3 countries which have joined this kind of an initiative and 3 countries which have not. So Kosovo has agreed that it's going to join, but has not joined yet so far. Why? This is a big, like a political issue. Of course, they have an interest in joining this. And of course, this is a demand now, not just from the US, but from EU as well. So yeah, so this is an open Balkan, a new try and a new initiative in order to make these conflicting societies together. The most important thing is that the interest of each and every Balkan state is very different. So if Serbia is getting investments and it's getting huge investments into infrastructure and its railroad network together with Macedonia, other countries are not getting this. So they'll be probably benefiting, and they can get a benefit from this in regard to trade, and then again spread the trade to other countries and then weaken the other countries. And this is one of the biggest obstacles to this development, because they say, oh, for example, this country is gonna be a dominant in the open Balkan, and of course it has some reason as well. So I'm just going to jump into 5G technology, because I consider 5G technology, when we speak about energy, 5G technology and the flow of information, as a kind of a resource, right? We know that you need, with all these bitcoins and blockchain, so we see that you really need a stable, and we all freak out when you don't have a stable internet connection. Hopefully here in Ljubljana we have. So it's getting into a small door into these post-conflict societies, and you already, only one American we have here, and not so many Americans are listening probably to this. Maybe they're going to see this. So we already know the conflict between Huawei and the USA government. So why is this conflict? Why this was the first conflict between them? It's of course very interesting, because China is becoming a technologically dominant power, and of course many societies, and of course poorer societies, depend on this cheap technology because they want to, right? They want to develop, and this is one of the keys to development. This is an issue which we can of course discuss. So in the Washington, someone is, yeah. Yeah, I continue. I speak. So the untrusted vendors in this case is of course hiding Huawei. So the Chinese, the biggest Chinese vendor, Huawei, and of course when I mentioned energy supplies is the Russia. So they don't really claim and say that you cannot trade with these guys, but they say, okay, just be careful. And of course, untrusted vendors is going to be Huawei. Of course, taking into consideration its interesting practice of getting included in in post-conflict societies and getting jobs, huge projects done overall. What is very important to mention here is that China is making, in regard to technology, big investments in Afghanistan. And again, China is making big investments before. It was very influential in Armenia, like in this Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And now it's dominating both Armenia and Azerbaijan because it's also building up a big hub. Huawei is building up a big hub. And we cannot really make a differentiation between the investment, the interest of the Chinese government and Huawei, because it's in some sense government company. So here are the Kosovo companies. I just wanna mention that again they are divided because there are state-owned companies which have different interests, and it is interesting to see that of course the state-owned company is going to be dominated on the market. So right, this is why, for example, the Serbian side also wants to have its proper share of the market, and this is an interesting thing how they are getting its telecommunication companies through a small door into this thing. And again, now we come back to the energy. According to the Brussels agreement, there are two companies which are supposed to be established, Elektrosever and the Društvo Elektrosever. One is supposed to collect the unpaid electricity bills, because sometimes people, for some years, they haven't paid for their electricity bills, right? They don't want to pay them to some companies, in this case the Kosovo companies ones, and then the one which is going to be able to transfer energy, right, transport energy, and to sell energy in this market. Why is this important? Because it matters whose energy you are selling, right? If someone has, if someone doesn't have access to a certain market, then they cannot sell, right? Their energy is going to be somewhere stored somewhere back there. So it's all about the war and the battle to get bigger and bigger markets where you can actually sell. And this is one of the most important things when you can see it on these case studies, that everyone is trying to get markets. And while we are observing, we are able to observe better how these things are happening in post-conflict societies. It's harder to observe how it happens in the EU, for example. But of course, EU is also taking the same pattern, right? So we can observe that how this battle between interests, various interests, are happening globally. Okay, here are some slides I just want to run through. This is about the courts. This is about the Kosovo Specialist Chambers, which is actually a court for war crimes, but it's covering ICTY, UNMIC, and EULEX courts, and all of these courts are actually official, not just war crimes courts. In fact, failing regarding war crimes, and in fact failing of implementing rule of law in some post-conflict society, in this case Kosovo. So we see that even after 20 years, the war crimes, which is kind of a human rights and so on, hasn't been really fixed in Kosovo. Why is this a problem? This is a problem because we have ICC, we have Kosovo Special Chamber. So we see that if we cannot, if we all agree about human rights as something that as a basic right, something which we are not breaching at all, we see that if we cannot establish this and guarantee these rights overall in post-conflict societies, it's then even harder to get into some kind of business-related things and enforce them, because people have interest, and people have interest not to lose money. People, of course, have a huge, and big companies and the societies have huge demand to make a profit. So this is how the global society works. And then just to outline the numbers of divisions, how the global society is permanently divided, right? We see that these are the numbers of divisions of ICC, the Rome Statute, right? Pretty much half of the international community, the UN member states are accepting this, is a member of this, and then again, 111, these numbers change, right? Not daily, but of course they change. And 111 member states do recognize Kosovo. And of course, we have the ones which are not going to do that. Why? Because they have an interest. There is an interest in this regard because unofficially, China and Russia are supporting Serbia and are supporting the non-recognizer states, and some states can get benefits from this. So this is something what is in the hidden agenda. This is about the visa liberalization, where actually, again, no human rights are recognized because all and everyone is from Kosovo treated as a criminal right, so they cannot, the country cannot really get the level of development it would deserve. So as a conclusion, as this will be a conclusion for regarding Kosovo, we have more data. Last data we have regarding Nagorno-Karabakh and Afghanistan conflicts. The Nagorno-Karabakh has also finished during the Corona times, and this is some kind of a change has been agreed between the governments of Azerbaijan, and Armenia. And these are the most important, this is the most important agreement where they have described what they want. This has been many times on the table, but not accepted. Why this conflict has happened overall? Because there is an interest of Russia to be connected, to be freely and more connected towards south. That means connecting it to Iran. And then, of course, another very important thing is that China, with its Belt and Road Initiative, is through the Caspian Sea going to be connected more to the Middle East and then again to Africa. It's very important that they are focusing on this road, not just waterways, but this road and railroad connections, because goods can travel faster and there is a demand for goods to travel faster, right? We will want to get our products faster from, not just from China, but from everywhere. So it's interesting to observe how actually everyone agreed on the East. Everyone agreed about this thing, and Turkey supported Azerbaijan, and then it was agreed with the Russian government that it's gonna be the peacekeeping mission, but observed by a specific observing mission, also including Turkey. And then again, that although the borders have changed over the Nagorno-Karabakh, there'll be a Lachin corridor, meaning a small corridor actually, right? This small entity is not going to die. It's going to have a connection to the Armenia, which are actually supporting this. So we see how things from these post-conflict societies are able to depict the facts which are actually part of the real life, when we see that people want to be interconnected, right? And then I don't know how I'm doing with time. Yeah, so just to jump over to the Chinese, as you know, the USA has withdrawn from the territory of Afghanistan. So what is happening? Very quickly, Chinese have reestablished themselves. Why? Because they are neighboring countries, of course. And apart from the terrorist issue, they have the Beijing economic interests. Chinese companies have already inked contracts to extract copper mine from the Mas Ainak mine and fresh oil from fields in the Amudarya basin, right? So this can be said that now Afghanistan is from their Saudi Arabia of lithium, and we all know the importance of lithium. And of course, Chinese are successfully solving their problems with minerals, because they know where the minerals are already, and they are able to enter those markets. It's very interesting to observe that the Chinese are not using military power. In case of Afghanistan, they have the support of Russia, of course. So from the north, they have Russia. From the west, they have Iran. So they are kind of safe. And then the most important thing, that their extraction businesses are going to be safe from the Taliban, because they have made an agreement with them, right? So they are able to secure resources for them. So China needs a stable Afghanistan. China is keen to incorporate Afghanistan into the Belt and Road Initiative once again, being a partner of India. If we have some candidates here from colleagues from India, and of course, or Pakistan, I cannot really discriminate. But anyway, China is friends with both right now, right? One with BRICS. No. China is not friends with Pakistan and India? Oh, so no BRICS. Already a conclusion, yeah. Okay, so already, okay, I'll finish. Okay, maybe it's better not to get into this. Yeah, so besides economic and secret interest, a major Chinese objective is to impose its own model of governance over Afghanistan. So these are the 3 case studies I have tried to bring in. It's not just about human rights, democratization, and so forth. It's much about resources and, of course, interconnectedness in many different senses. And as a conclusion, because I always like to, this is like my home village, where we have this refugee crisis, where you have refugees traveling every day to Europe, trying to jump over the Hungarian border fence. And now we have also some gunshots. So we really see how the borders of Europe are a place where things happen, which are not very good for many, and to be solved. So thank you for your attention. And then questions probably come in afterwards, right? I don't believe someone.
We can take one burning question.
Burning question? No, later, right?
Then we move to the next topic.
Burning question.
Burning.
A rating question.
So let's continue then with our next speaker, which is who is Professor Luigi Crema. from University of Milan and also visiting professor at Notre University, Indiana, who will speak about the conditionality as an obstacle to international cooperation. So Professor Luigi, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Paolo and Matjaž, for organizing this, and thank you for those coming here. I made an effort to be here live, even if Zoom is available, so I'm not pulling the ears of those who will talk on Zoom. I'm just enjoying a lot the live contacts after COVID restrictions, and even if it meant to me to take a Flixbus, because Ljubljana is a wonderful place, but doesn't have a good train from Milan, nor a flight. I'm enjoying every second with some colleagues around and with a wonderful city that I'm eager to visit in the afternoon and later. So first, to thank to the organizers and to be alive, at least some of you. And thanks for those who are taking some time off to be virtually present with me. So I will reflect a bit on conditionality. It is a hot topic under different angles. And therefore, I will lay out how conditionality is intertwined with political and economical struggles on many tables. I will open more problems than closing them. This is also something you do in a conference, in a round table like this. And maybe when I will close one of these problems, I will write an article. But for now, I will describe the problems and I will discuss them. So conditionality and the IMF, when I sent the outline, I wanted to focus on the struggle that the International Monetary Fund was having with Tunisia in December 2022 in order to sign the final deal on the Tunisian loan. Because the government of Tunisia was not happy to accept the reasonable conditions that the International Monetary Fund was imposing on a 1.6 billion loan, because was contesting the fact that the IMF was imposing the conditions upfront, explaining that without those money, explaining also with very colorful language, but I'm going to bones, without those money, Tunisia could not even start paying in a few months the stipends to the public sector. And therefore was unreasonable for the IMF to request those money, those reforms upfront. So for those in the EU, for sure it's familiar, the struggle around conditionality, because the EU had, let's say now, a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, the European Commission issued a regulation on conditionality for budget regulation, for budget constraints. And when you read what is in the regulation, that was very debated politically, the first article of the regulation among the purposes set the respect for rule of law as one of the aims of the regulation. So it is not something that regards the IMF, it's something that regards a political space. The IMF, in talking to Tunisia, was talking about structural reforms, especially in the banking sector, that would avoid the repetition or exacerbation of the crisis that led Tunisia to ask money. And this is in the IMF foundational documents. So it is possible for the IMF to request reforms that, according to the IMF, are necessary to curb the problems that led a government to request financial help. We don't have this kind of language within the EU, but because of the need for money around the COVID crisis and the recovery after the crisis of the banking sector and in general of the European economy, the idea of using conditionality, an instrument that was already in international cooperation, was perceived as a viable tool, not to talk about a structural economic problem, but to talk about political issues. And in this case, about the core values of the European Union, something that is in the treaties, Article 2, something that regards rule of law, a concept that is not completely described within the treaties, something that probably the European Court of Justice and the Commission on many occasions will clarify better, but that at the moment is not laid out in hard law, let's put it this way. So those are two very different kind of conditionality. So the Tunisian resistance to do some reform is different from some European countries contesting this use of conditionality that is more political, while the first one is more geared towards the reform of economic sectors or macroeconomic problems, as the IMF describes them. These two models of conditionality, these two struggles, reminded me of a third model that regards the World Bank. The World Bank, by statute, in 1944, 1945, laid out the possibility to intervene. It's actually the core business of the World Bank, to intervene in reconstructing developing economies. For this reason, has political prohibition, the so-called political prohibition, in Article 4, Section 10, that explicitly prohibits the bank to approve projects of development under conditions of political reform. This is because of many reasons, but let's put it this way, because of the institutional approach, international approach that wants that international cooperation is based on a specific focus and not on a political hegemony. The strength of the political clause at Article 4.10 was tested already in the 60s when the World Bank did not withdrew projects with South Africa, notwithstanding the condemnation of the apartheid regime. So it is something that is embodied in the World Bank, in the tradition of the World Bank, and that only recently, through several papers and internal guidelines, included certain areas that can regard conditions. So for example, on subject matters like corruption, like criminal law and criminal reforms, now the World Bank includes certain conditions, but we don't have a broad, far-reaching idea of conditionality as the one that the EU expressed in 2020. So those are three different ways to see conditionality. I'm not gonna build any attempt to justify whether or not liberal democracies are more successful in terms of economic performances than other countries. This is not, first of all, it's not my job. Second, it's something that is attempted many times, but it's something that even without going into the scholarly debates on the topic, that is at the moment put at strain because of China's wealth. It's not anymore taboo to say that maybe democracy is not the best and the most efficient way to pursue wealth. It's not a taboo anymore to say so. It's a puzzle. So why liberal economies are often struggling while an authoritarian state is successful? This is a topic that in a debate on a BRICS world order and sustainability, like this roundtable, lurks in the background. Why are states outside the closest Western influence buying services from other countries? So let's go back to the Tunisian crisis. When the IMF requested the reasonable conditions on the banking system, the same conditions that were requested to Lebanon and to Egypt, by the way, three Arabic countries that alone account for about a third of the population of Arabic countries. They were requested for loans by the IMF. They were requested by the IMF for certain conditions for the loans. At the same time, the Bank for Development of the BRICS and China and the Chinese government itself in a parallel track proposed to intervene instead of the IMF with cash up front with no conditions. So politics is not only part of conditionality as a tool to break through an idea of development that includes political reforms, as for the EU and conditionality, is not only a possible tool to fix the macroeconomical problems that the IMF puts in the picture before granting money. It is not the minimal intervention that the World Bank has in its hand, in its power, when dealing with project for development, but it's something that disappears completely in the market of political influence. When Tunisia says, I don't want to do anything, I don't want the minimal request of the World Bank, I don't want the minimal but economical model of the IMF, I don't want to deal for sure with the strong political influence of a conditionality European style. I just want the money upfront from China and to join the BRICS. So those are 4 different models that at the moment insist in front of our landscape as policymakers, or at least scholars studying policymaking, that are very different, and that unfortunately for some political reasons of resistance or anti-Western narrative, the Tunisian president clearly laid out, we don't want the former colonizers to tell us what to do. The IMF is a global institution, it's not the former colonizers. And but also is not requesting the political reform that the EU is asking other European countries themselves in order to access the possible financing of certain areas of reform. So we have that between Tunisia and the IMF, there is a dynamic of hegemony. When there are reforms that are necessary, or maybe not, as Tunisia says, to avoid the problem that led to the need for the IMF. When we have a very strong political intervention within the EU itself, when at stake there are relationships between allies, we have a stronger conditionality between allies than between independent states dealing with an international organization. In this, everybody can have different ideas on this, but on this, let's say, colorful landscape, the Chinese intervention and the BRICS bloc comes adding politics from the back door, saying, well, you're just playing like the West is a monolith and can play in a way or in another within the sphere of influence of the EU, a political compact sphere, or we're going outside with the mask of an international organization claiming to be more independent than the West itself, with a minimal condition. But the politics can also come from the back door and saying, well, if those are the talks, I can come just with the cash and I buy through money political influence in your backyard, because Tunisia is the backyard. So I had 10 pages of quotations. I didn't read any of them. I hope I summarized enough the 3 different models of conditionality that at the moment, in the very recent months, are discussed, used, criticized, and fought. I can drop few references in the debate if you're interested, or if you're not interested, just for my paper. My last point on the politics of BRICS and of struggle doesn't want to give a bitter taste to the overall presentation. I just want to open a reflection on the possible use we have, as in this case, I'm putting myself as an Italian, so as a European, dealing with international law and international cooperation, the humbleness we have to have in opening our wallet, as your EU cooperating, the humbleness as a Western person, the IMF is international, the humbleness the IMF has to have, and I think it's pretty consistent over the years in requesting the same amount of recipes, but that are now contested. And to be a bit more intelligent when we deal with certain crises, such as, for example, the crisis happening around the Mediterranean Sea, because we're not anymore in the 90s, in which the paradigm of economic prosperity plus legalism could describe every attempt to rebuild and develop an area of the globe. The Mediterranean Sea, since 2011, is basically surrounded by civil wars. The Mediterranean Sea is the theater of massive migrations. The Mediterranean Sea is the crossroads of the current struggle between the BRICS and Europe and for the West. If we hope to deal with the financial crisis of Lebanon, Egypt, and Tunisia with the standard rules, we're going to repeat a mistake that we did in the last 50 years, basically. That is to bring a development just with legalism and money, and without basically putting anything more than that into the chessboard. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Burning question?
Yeah, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it has to come here a bit so that. Talk here so they can hear.
This is a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. I really like it. 2 points really. Go to Google and type IMF as a tool of colonization, and guess what's the first result will be? Conditionality. Because conditionality is seen as a byword for the IMF colonizing and recolonizing through the back door these developing countries. Look at the agreement that they just signed with Pakistan, and they just announced it today. $3 billion they're going to give Pakistan. Look at the conditions. So I have, on a personal level, I'm coming from an Arab country originally. The way we see IMF and the way it impose conditionality on us is seen as a colonization by the back door. Now, if they want to do it to impose financial and structural changes, which they impose on other countries within the European Union, that's absolutely fine. But they always take it a step further. And that's the problem, is the step further. That does not mean that the Chinese money is free. Chinese money has conditionality, but I call it indirect conditionality. Why? Because they don't demand it at the beginning, they demand it later on. Once they hook you on the money, they create the addiction. The next installment, they demand things. Look what happened in East Africa, and the way they dealt with Kenya, the way they dealt with. This is what they exactly did in Africa, in Eastern Africa. They gave you the money, and when they knew that you're going to ask for more money, they put the conditions. So there is no clear model. I think the IMF really need to realize, and I agree totally with you, that the Mediterranean is very important, and they really need to make sure that they create the right environment to give the money and improve the economy rather than politically. That's my point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, James, correct?
Justin.
Justin, sorry. I remember the J at least from lunch. When you meet too many people at the same time. Thanks you for your remarks. I'm not going to answer. I agree. No, I agree. I'm not going for the cheap way that is in only 20 minutes. No, I have a serious question mark on conditionality, because okay, on paper, the IMF should act fair in imposing the conditions. Often this was not the case. So it's not what I can do. It's not a criticism on the model. It's a criticism that I like more than the European one. So more humble, let's say, to the bare bones. But then they don't do it. They do more than that, and then there is the political struggle. So that's why I say, rather than addressing the question in general, it's about the experience of it. The other question, now I break the second point in favor of the IMF only, is because I spoke to a couple of persons about this issue last couple of years ago when I started studying conditionality, is the lack of time that they have in addressing these huge problems. So when governments come, usually the issues have been under observance for a while, but then when the IMF goes full in with the government, the timeline is very strict. And so what we can do, publishing a paper and studying something, is that we get rejected, we polish, and they are like, okay, within 3 months, we have to go on this. Within 6 months, we have to do this. And in 24 months, we have to do that. And, if there is, banking sector plus defense plus, it's also easy to sneak in an unfair condition. I totally agree, because when you're under a huge time constraint, the possibility to revise, review, and anyway. So I take your comment, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Yes. Yeah.
Short break. We'll start we'll continue with you, Mr. Tariq Khan. Just 1 second, please. We're just organizing our classroom, so we'll continue very person.
Yes.
Can we continue? Yes, please. So great. Thank you very much, Professor Luigi Crema. So our next speaker is Mr. Tariq Khan. He's an international relations analyst focusing on Asia-Africa relations, Pakistan-African relations, and South-South cooperation. Mr. Tariq holds MA in political science in international relations from University of Sargodha, Pakistan, and Master of Science in international relations from Bakria University, Islamabad. He's also the program host of international talk show programs, and he's working as a senior research associate with the Institute for Global Dialogue associated with the University of South Africa. Welcome, Mr. Tariq Khan, and the floor, please.
Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Chairperson of the panel, and the all honored distinguished panelists and scholars of the. Oh, sorry, let me share. Let me share the presentation.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Mr. Chairman of the panel and all the distinguished scholars and panelists, dear students. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for inviting me in this wonderful conference that was organized on a very important topic, persistent imbalances in international trade and prospects for sustainable development, focus on the developing countries. That topic is very important to address in this contemporary time. So my presentation is promoting South-South cooperation to address the persistent imbalances in Asia-Africa trade relations. So here is the introduction. This paper explores the potential of South-South cooperation to address the persistent imbalances in trade relations between Asia and Africa, and how South-South cooperation can transform and challenge existing power dynamics. So a qualitative content analysis approach is applied to identify key themes and theoretical concept of international political economy and social cooperation guide the analysis. So here is the relevance of social cooperation, as you know, and international political economy that explore the interaction between politics and economics in the global arena. It analyzes how power relations, institutions, and policies influence economic outcomes such as trade flows, investment patterns, and development trajectories. Social cooperation is an theoretical framework or agenda that gives emphasis on collaboration and solidarity among developing countries to address shared challenges and endorse mutual development. So here is the basic understanding of persistent imbalance. You know, the persistent imbalances in Asia-Africa trade relations attributes to the ongoing unequal distribution of power, resources, and opportunities in trade relationship between these regions, and it encompasses different dimensions, including unequal market access, technological disparities, and imbalanced investment flows. So here are the persistence of balance and contributing factors. First of all, colonial legacies and historical context. The historical background, predominantly the legacy of colonialism, has considerably shaped the persistence of imbalance. Colonialization often resulted in the extraction of the resources from Asia and Africa to sustain the industrialization and development of colonial powers. So this historical exploitation and unequal trade relationship have left a long-lasting impact on perpetuating imbalances in power and resources. Next is the historical trade relationships and power dynamics. As you know, power dynamics play a significant role in persistence of the imbalance. Developed countries, as you know, by leveraging their economic and political influence, commonly put noteworthy significant influence over trade terms and traditions, regulations, resulting in unequal agreements and asymmetric trade relationships. This imbalances is reinforced by disparities in bargaining power, market access, barriers, and asymmetrical distribution of technological advancements. Next, economic and structural factors that have contributed to the trade imbalances. The number of economic and structural factors that contribute to the persistence of the imbalance. As you know, developing countries in Asia and Africa frequently face challenges such as limited diversification of economies, dependence on primary commodities, and insufficient infrastructure as well as technological capabilities. These factors detain their ability to fully exploit their resources and participate in global value chains, further aggravating the balances. So restricted infrastructure and technological competences in Africa hindered their capability to process the raw materials and contribute in higher valued activities. So a pattern of exploring low value commodities under the economic diversification and sustainable development. Here are some the persistent imbalances that contribute that always contribute the imbalance of the trade or imbalanced relationship between Asia and Africa. So here are the trade imbalance, how this has created Asia, as you know, predominantly countries like China, Japan, and South Korea has emerged as a major exporter of manufactured goods, machinery, and technological intensive products. These countries have developed strong manufacturing capabilities and have global manufacturing hubs. On the other hand, you can say that African countries, with very few exceptions, principally export commodities such as raw materials, minerals, and agricultural products. So this trade patterns created a noteworthy trade imbalance with Asian countries exporting more value-added products to Africa than they import. So dependency on commodities, Africa heavily reliance on commodity exports makes a contribution to trade imbalance. The region economies frequently face challenges in diversifying their export base and moving up the value chain. This dependency on commodities makes African countries vulnerable to cost fluctuations, market volatility, and limited income generation that hinder their economic development. Next is the infrastructure and productivity gap. As you know, this is the very important. As you know, Asian countries have invested heavily in infrastructure development, improving connectivity and establishing proficient logistic networks. This has enhanced their export abilities and competitiveness. In contrast, many African countries face infrastructure deficits, including inadequate transportation networks, power shortages, and restricted access to ports. These infrastructure challenges that hinder the productivity, increase transportation cost, and hinder the ability of African countries to compete in global market. As the next is technology and innovation gap. Asian countries have made important investment in technology, innovation, and research and development, especially China, Indonesia as well. They have constructed robust technological capabilities, fostering the development of high-value industries and promoting exports of advanced products. In comparison, African countries are, often lack of the infrastructure, financial resources, and expertise to invest in research and development and adopt advanced technologies. Next is trade barriers. These are the most important. There non-tariff barriers, rules and regulations, terms and conditions, including multifaceted regulatory requirements, technical barriers to trade can hinder the African countries' access to Asian markets. These barriers can produce or generate additional cost and administrative burdens for the African exporters, not only African exporters, but all the Asian importers and exporters, further exacerbating the trade imbalances between Asia and Africa. Next, in trade in manufacturing goods, Asian countries, particularly China, control the export of manufactured goods to Africa. As you know, Africa is working in China is working in Africa since 2-3 decades. So many companies are working there. Chinese electronics and home appliances flood African markets, whereas African countries struggle to compete in the same sectors due to limited industrial capacity and technological capabilities. Infrastructure development, again, as I explained earlier, commodity exports. As you know, Africa is very affluent in natural resources, including oil, minerals, and agricultural products. However, the majority of these commodities are exported to Asia without noteworthy value additions. Asian countries import these resources at low prices, process them into finished products, and sell them back to Africa at much higher prices, widening the trade deficit and trade imbalances between the Asia and Africa. Agricultural trade, as you know, this is the backbone of these two regions, including Asia and Africa. So predominantly countries like Thailand, India, Pakistan, Indonesia, and most of the African countries export a wide range of agricultural products to Africa, including rice, wheat, and spices, and other products. So African agricultural exports to Asia are restricted and primarily consist of raw commodities such as coffee and tea, etc. This highlights the limited value addition and processing capabilities in African agricultural sectors. Next is potential, how we see address a potential of the South-South cooperation and Asia-Africa trade balance. So enhancing trade and investment linkages, as you know, South-South cooperation offers opportunities for developing countries in Asia and Africa to develop their trade and investment linkages. These regions can endorse intra-regional trade, diversifying their export markets and reduce their dependency on developed countries by leveraging their complementarity strengths as well as resources. Knowledge sharing and technology transfer. This is also a platform for developing countries to share technological expertise and knowledge. Countries in Asia and Africa can approach and adopt technologies that are appropriate for their specific context through partnerships and collaborations. This enables them to improve productivity, promote innovation, and upgrade their industries. Human resource development and capacity building. This is a function enhancing the capacity and skills of developing countries in Asia and Africa through training programs, scholarships, and knowledge sharing platforms. These countries can reinforce their human resources and institutional capabilities and empower them to successfully participate in global trade and navigate multifaceted economic challenges. Initiatives that such as the African Capacity Building Foundation have supported capacity building efforts in Africa that enable countries to formulate and implement their efficient development strategies. Now, last is institutional and policy coordination. Social cooperation facilitate institutional and policy coordination among developing countries so that enable them to advocate for their common interest and deal with the imbalances in the global governance structure. So through platforms such as the group G77 and non-aligned movement, developing countries are collectively address issues such as the trade barriers, intellectual property rights, and inequitable global financial systems. So these are the potential of the social cooperation. Now, promising practices that have been implied by the social cooperation, that initiatives in the trade and investment, regional trade agreements, as you know, regional trade agreements such as the African Continental Free Trade Area and ASEAN Free Trade Area promotes regional economic integration by reducing tariffs and trade barriers among member states. So bilateral investments, countries in Asia and Africa can set up bilateral trade investment and treaties to promote investment flows between them, provide legal protections, incentives for investors that boost their cross-border investment and economic cooperation. For example, for instance, that China has entered into the various BITs with the African countries to facilitate investment and enhance economic ties. Joint ventures, as you know, partnerships are the backbone of the social cooperation. Government and business companies or communities from Asia and Africa can launch joint ventures and partnerships to leverage their respective strengths as well as resources. So South-South alliances and forums, as you know, forums like India-Africa Forum Summit, for Summit and Forum, and China-Africa Cooperation. These are the platform that provides for the dialogue, cooperation, and exchange of best practices. India-Africa Forum Summit is the high-level summit that brings together leadership from India and African countries. It aims to develop cooperation and partnership in various sectors, including trade, investment, agriculture, infrastructure, education, and healthcare. The pragmatic initiative that, such as the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, has facilitated the increased trade and investment flows that lead to significant growth in bilateral trade between China and African countries. So China is leading the social cooperation and promoting social cooperation, as well as India also working in African countries since 2 decades, and Pakistan recently has started to focus on African countries. So as a new player in the Africa, so China and India has already promoting social cooperation between Africa and Asia. Technology transfer and knowledge sharing. Developed countries in Asia, such as Japan and South Africa, have implemented programs to share their technological expertise at the African countries. So technology transfer initiatives, African nations can grow access to advanced technologies which can boost productivity, innovation, and economic development. Capacity building programs, as you know, already discussed, development assistance and aid. This is very important issue that some of the Asian countries like China and Japan are investing and in the development assistance, providing development assistance and aid to African nations as well as Asian countries as well. These initiatives support infrastructure development, infrastructure projects, poverty reduction programs, healthcare services, and educational initiatives, fostering socio-economic development as well as strengthening the ties between these two regions. Most importantly, the BRI and CPEC versus AHGC, Belt and Road Initiative, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, and Asia-Africa Growth Corridor are three different initiatives aimed at promoting connectivity, infrastructure development, economic cooperation. BRI Global Initiative seeks to connect Asia with Europe, Africa, and beyond through a wide range of infrastructure development, infrastructure projects. And CPEC, as you know, a flagship project of BRI focusing on particularly enhancing connectivity and trade between China and Pakistan, and also playing a role to connect with African countries and Central Asian countries, playing a role to connect Asia and Africa as well. And the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor is a joint initiative by India and Japan, gave attention on fostering connectivity and economic cooperation between Asia and Africa with a focus on sustainable development and inclusive growth. Next is findings and results of the paper. Colonial legacies and historical context influence the persistence of the imbalance in Asia and Africa trade relations. Asymmetric trade relationship and power dynamics affect the imbalance, with developed countries leveraging their influence to develop unequal agreements. Economic and structural factors such as limited diversification, dependence on primary commodities, insufficient infrastructure, and technological capabilities that contribute to the imbalance. Persistent imbalance hindered sustainable development and impeding the inclusive economic growth. So social cooperation provides address the imbalance through enhanced trade and investment linkages, knowledge sharing, technology transfer, and capacity building. Promising practice of social cooperation, as I said earlier, and including regional trade agreements, bilateral investment treaties, joint ventures, partnerships, and forums that support economic integration, investment flows, knowledge exchange, and sustainable development. Lessons learned for promoting social cooperation involves understanding power dynamics, tailoring technology transfer to local context, and ensuring inclusivity, transparency, and policy consistency in regional integration initiatives. So challenges in addressing social cooperation, these are the challenges that address constant in the in promoting social cooperation, whereas social cooperation holds significant potential, but there are several challenges and constraints that need to be addressed. These include restricted financial resources, inadequate infrastructure and capacity constraint in developing countries. Government must give a priority to mobilize financial resources both domestically and through international cooperation to support social initiatives. Overcoming geopolitical and power dynamics. Geopolitical and power dynamics have potential to influence the accomplishment of social cooperation and addressing the persistent imbalance. Strengthening partnership and collaboration, that I already said that promoting social cooperation requires well-built partnerships and collaborations between governments, business communities, and civil societies that can facilitate dialogue and cooperation among the stakeholders to promote collaborative and inclusive approach between these two regions. Now the policy recommendations and the way forward of strengthening institutional frameworks and mechanisms. As you know, it is essential to strengthen the institutional frameworks and mechanisms to promote social cooperation as a strategy for addressing the persistent imbalance in Asia-Africa trade relations. These frameworks include establishing dedicated platforms such as regional organizations and task forces to facilitate dialogue, coordination, and cooperation among participating countries, reducing non-tariff barriers and enhancing trade facilitation. This enhancement strategies contributes significantly in promoting balanced and inclusive trade relations. Government must give priority to simplify custom procedures, reducing bureaucracy, and streamlining trade documentation to facilitate smooth trade flows between these two regions. Facilitating capacity building and technology transfer, as we discussed earlier, promoting investment holds great facilitating these technology transfer is indispensable for bridging the technological divide between developed and developing countries. Government should give actively endorse initiatives that facilitate the transfer of appropriate and co-friendly or environmentally sound technologies to developing countries. So this can be done through the partnership, knowledge sharing, and capacity building programs that strengthen local industry growth and enhance their competitiveness. Encouraging best practices and knowledge sharing and best practices can exchange fulfill crucial function of social cooperation. Government should support platforms for knowledge exchange, such as conferences, workshops, online networks where countries can exchange experiences, share lessons learned, and work together in innovative approaches. The way forward, the government and international stakeholders can produce enabling environment for social cooperation, address persistent imbalance in Asia-Africa trade relations. By implementing these suggested policy recommendations, the purpose of these policy recommendations is to promote fairness, inclusivity, and sustainable in trade and investment, whereas fostering collaboration and knowledge sharing among developing countries. Thank you so much for your patience to listen to me, and thank you so much again.
Thank you very much, Tariq Khan. Are there any questions with respect to this presentation? Yes, no? So let me ask just one question, Mr. Tariq Khan. You mentioned you presented promising practices in cooperation.
Yes.
But can you provide some more concrete examples, either at the state level or at the level of individual local context, examples of such success practices of sharing or transfer of knowledge, technologies, support for improved local context?
Yeah, sure. As I said, Lee explained that AFCFTA from Africa, this is they recently launched in 2018. There's a practical example that promote social cooperation within the African region as well as with other region as well. ASEAN, as you know, trade agreements in this organization as other regional trading blocs in the Africa as well as in the other trading economic promoting organization in the Asia are just such as SAARC professional preferential trading agreement and South Asian free trade area that promote the trade liberalization among member states, boost market access, and foster economic cooperation, contributing to the social cooperation in the region. So other trade areas that promotes trade liberalization and regional integration among member states of the African countries that are their local trading blocs as well. So as joint ventures that I have mentioned, that Indian technical and economic cooperation, that is an initiative by the Indian government to provide technical assistance and training to professionals from developing countries such as in the Africa. So India expands lines of credit to African countries to support their development projects. So South-South alliances and forums that I already discussed, that India-Africa Forum and as well as China-Africa for Cooperation Forum, and technology transfer and knowledge sharing. Practical examples of the Japan and South Korea are already working on the technology transfer of the to African countries as well. and their capacity building of the African countries, development assistance, and the aid by the China and Japan through Belt and Road Initiative, as well as a growth corridor that was launched by India and Japan together. So here is other examples, such as Japan International Cooperation Agency is a Japanese governmental agency that provides technical assistance, grants, and loans for development projects in Asia and Africa that focuses on diverse sectors such as infrastructure development, agriculture, health care, and education and capacity building. So as you know, Tokyo International Conference on African Development is the most important international conference initiated by the Japanese government to endorse economic development in Africa, especially. It serves as a platform for dialogue and cooperation between China and African countries, focusing on areas including trade, investment, infrastructure, and human resources development, technology transfer. So another example of the initiative, Japan External Trade Organization, is also assisting trade and investment between Japan and other countries as well. So the biggest example that I has given to Belt and Road Initiative that is promoting practically and pragmatically the social cooperation between Asia and Africa and connecting other regions as well as Europe and Western, also American. So that is the practical promising practices of the social cooperation.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mr. Tariq Khan.
Welcome.
We are moving to our next speaker, who is Olani Olayinka, a lecturer from the Faculty of Law, Redeemers University, Osun State, Nigeria, who has studied at the University of Pretoria, South Africa, at the University of Awolowo in Nigeria. Also, he attended Nigerian Law School in Lagos. So he has also very extensive experience. And please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, the organizers, particularly for showing interest in development of Africa and in particular Nigeria. And the discourse of this nature will be of tremendous assistance to the continent. So very grateful for this. The task before me is to look at the persistent imbalances in international trade and the prospect for sustainable development, which for my own stage has been summarized as trade, development, and environment. But within this context, I formulated my own title, which I call Foreign Direct Investment and the Settlement of Disputes in Africa, seeking to interrogate economic growth and industrialization in Nigeria. That's beyond preeminence of judiciary. Now, the situation on ground in Nigeria, talking in Africa generally, talking about trade imbalance, it's good that issues like this are being raised because from time to time, Africa is looked at as a developing economy. But the issue will be for how long will the continent be developing? How long does it take for a continent to develop? But discourse like this will go beyond just looking at it just in the atmosphere, has to go deeper on why a continent like this is what it is. We are talking about imbalance in international trade. And that assumes, by way of introduction, it assumes that the grounds have to be level for trading partners. When the ground is not level, when it is better in one side and not fine in another, then you'll be recording imbalance, bearing in mind also that there is conflict of interest from time to time. The developed economies, do they really want the developing ones to cross the border? That is one issue to address. Then the developing economies, are they equally decisive to develop? That is another thing. Because looking at Africa, I will look at it at the two sides, and we identify what are their problems and what are the imposed problems on them, but by political maturity, which they ought also to, which Africa also to overcome over time. For instance, we'll be talking about the issue of self-determination, right to self-determination. History brings to remind us that Africa was also colonized. Before colonization, there was the slave trade. We are here now talking about trade imbalance. Looking into the history, we look at what balance in treatment was afforded Africa in that context. There wouldn't be any balance. That was the situation then. That's the slave trade. Africa was applying the slaves for use even in the industrialization of developed economies. And later, the slave trade transformed into colonialism after industrialization, colonialism. And we are now looking at it. Do we now have a situation we call neo-colonialism at hand? In the context of this, we are now talking about trade. We seem to be advocating for trade balance. But this paper is now saying that before you talk about trade balance, you have to look at what are the conditions upon which the partners are they equal in status? If you say autonomous countries, are they really autonomous? As at the time these countries in Africa they got independence, it is being argued in certain quarters that it was only flag independence that they had. And if you have only flag independence, that means your economy is tailored to your colonial masters. And this is the case being considered in this paper. So by way of introduction, I'm saying that to be historical in perspective and with a view of addressing what situation on ground now is, so that a proper view of this can be gotten. Now, the prospect for sustainable development, which I've talked about in my own part here now as interrogate economic growth and industrialization in Nigeria. Economic growth and industrialization. So it's that the development is advocated to be aligned within the issue here now. But the SDG, particularly goal 10, is about reducing inequality within and among nations. So that is the context upon which we are looking at a trade balance. Yes. That means reducing inequality within and among nations. For this paper, we argue out the fact that between Africa and the economies, developed economies that they are trading with, that imbalance is there. I've said it and I'm saying it again. Because of historical developments and stuff like that. So that imbalance has been there. So this one also, the fact of locality, which denotes a political and economic relation in which sovereignty of a nation, a people rest on the power of another nation. So in that kind of situation, if there's a trade between the developing and the developed economy, it's not likely to be balanced. It will tilt. The balance of it will tilt one side, which we all know what is. So that is the situation that when the countries in Africa were said to get independence, they did not really get a new independence from their colonial masters. Economic autonomy is not gotten. Because looking beyond even this situation, we look at the Berlin Conference, in which Africa was a long economic interest of certain developed economies, and that factor till today is still a hindrance to develop even the trade progress of the continent of states in Africa, because the decision then was not on the basis of pure, it just done arithmetic without any consideration. That issue of culture now in respect of the demarcation is still a factor that weighs down the Africa in terms of ability to trade, do business. We may also want to look at the issue of language Africa mostly are informal economies. Informal in the sense that many people are rich, and the poor are within the domestic economy. The fact of colonialism shows the fact that these local languages are local and they're not recognized in combat. So when we be talking about trade imbalance now, we will see that many people in Africa have been active in trade because language is not recognized as a tool for communication in commercial transaction. So there is difficulty in translating from indigenous language to English or French and stuff like that, which in that shows the imbalance that within the international trade between Africa and the developed economy. Now, from independence now, states in Africa, from the colonialism and the independence that they have left their basis. Yes, they have left their basis, and in tracing the development, it has now become a problem. But there's a popular uses: if you do not go, you should go to basis. So this is what states in Africa are now. They do not know how to really start business, how to really operate, how to solve the so-called dependence that they have gotten. There are other continents that were also colonized and discovered themselves. Asia was also colonized. America was colonized by Europe, by UK, and that does stop the development from that. But for the problem in Africa, the fact that it's indecisive on the way towards development, and even the fact development has been couched in terms of stands laid down by the developed countries. So that's another problem. The bar that is being set for states in Africa is foreign, is alien to the Africa. So it's a standard that is beyond the African attainment that has been set before that we will say you are developed, but not by your own standard, by a standard that is foreign to you. So now this is one other problem that Africa faces in terms of trade and even development. Now, in terms of development or trading, Africa having not done its work, looks beyond even a state or even the Africa and looks to the developed economy. And what do they arrive at? They look for foreign direct investment, and bilateral investment treaties are signed. But the question is, are these bilateral investments, bilateral agreements and treaties really for the developing economies? The answer is no, because the investors also have the profit motive of coming down. And experience has shown in Africa that most of these multinational corporations that operate, particularly in Nigeria, they violate the peace of the environment. For instance, in the excavation of mineral resources, crude oil, for instance, in Nigeria, Shell Petroleum has been a living figure even before the independence of the country, and it has signed so many bilateral agreement treaties with Nigeria. But the fact is this: that operation in Nigeria has been against the right to life and to dignity of indigenes, particularly of Niger Delta area of Nigeria. But the fact of these bilateral treaties is so extensive that government does not even have the little way to enforce. The decision of that is against gas, which is being perpetrated by the Shell Corporation. So on account of this, many lost and dignity, and not only this, also livelihood of people are destroyed because we have leakages on the waters, and the industrial waste that are created into the forest land destroying trees and even the crops of indigenous peoples. When we'll be talking about development, it should be everybody have a stake in the economy, active participation by everybody. The involvement of Shell Corporation Ghana is affecting the participation of indigenous people in the economy, cutting life short, and this is we are now looking at balance in trade. This is surely because the activities of that multinational corporation is affecting all other stakeholders in the economy. It's sacking them and people are forced to relocate. So this situation we are looking at trade balance, it is not balanced, and the historical factor, the colonial factor is very, very eminent in this. So at the end of the day, foreign direct and bilateral investment, we confirm, it does not confirm, it does development, as attested to by countries like Ghana, they have investment from countries that they do not even have. So for the Africa, it should weigh it wants to develop, because it takes two to go, not just two people, or to really do business together evenly. Now, coming from colonialism, the crop of leadership in Africa, can we say the independence was given them on the platter of gold, such that they do not cherish the autonomy in every respect? Governance in Africa has been and drive economic has not been there. They have not been, the leadership has not been there at all. So, but sustainable development are hoped to be realized based on democracy, good governance, and the rule of law, and the general enabling environment. This is lacking in Africa. That's a vision of sustainable development, but it is lacking in Africa. We have the crop of leadership in Africa, particularly in Nigeria, who believe that I should be there because of my ethnic affiliation, that believe that I should be there because of my religion, not necessarily because I have programs to discharge. And in Nigeria, for instance, once you are there, if you are confused about the way forward, you will just stay put and finish your 2 terms, which is 8 years further. What the attestation we have after is that it's difficult to govern Nigeria. That's after 8 years. And this is the crop of leadership we are looking at that can help towards the realization of the development goals. Africa does not have most of these people that can engineer the development of economic development rather. So now a good leadership in Africa will look at the aspect of depletion of resources on foreign trips. It has become a fashion now, particularly in Nigeria, that you have political leadership looking towards the developed economies for foreign direct investment, having forgotten the fact that certain things must be in place. They should first put certain things in place in a situation where there is no security for lives and properties, and you are calling on developed economies to come and develop, to come and invest in your economy in a situation where the desired infrastructure is lacking and you are wasting the resources, the little resources on ground, to
so Mr. Olenka,
go and call foreign investors. That shows lack of skill.
We have some problems with the internet interruption, just to let you know.
So,
also
okay.
like to slowly come to the end of your presentation. Thank you.
Yes, I will quickly go through this aspect. There's this aspect of the rule of law, which has been overflowed in the issue of trade relations, and there are arguments and counter arguments for bringing arbitration, foreign arbitration treaties into the Africa, believing that local courts may not have the wherewithal to handle international trade and affairs. But this paper takes the position that any dispute that arises on account of business transactions should be handled in-house. That's section 6, subsection 1 of the Constitution of the Republic of Nigeria. It gives the courts the power to handle domestic, to handle matters that happen here. And I look at the arbitration, international arbitration, and I see, for instance, investment, state and development dispute settlement. I look at it, it is lopsided in that it gives investor nations the power to seek compensation for breach of treaties, and it does not give host nations the same powers to sue and to seek relief whenever the investor state abuses hospitality that is given by way of gas flaring and stuff like that. It's been difficult for by way of recommendation. The paper looks at development, and it tries to point attention to the fact that development can never be attained where there is exploitation and conflict, where there are no equal opportunities for everyone to develop and for everyone to contribute his quota to. What we have in Nigeria, particularly now, is that the indigenous people are caught out of production. They are not at their best because of dominant economic involvement. So if economy will develop, everybody will maintain its position in the nation. Nobody will have to sack anybody. What we have now, indigenous people have to relocate from their ancestral homes to a distant place where they are idle. Two is the fact that Nigeria and Africa, we should look into the kind of development they want to pursue. What African countries pursue presently are imposed development, imposed from their colonial affiliation. So Africa should look inwards now and look at areas in which they have the wherewithal to operate, not necessarily looking out for assistance. Before anybody, any nation will come to assistance, we have risen to a reasonable level. So Africa should look inwards and by way of self-reliance, should look more towards innovative development. It should look at businesses that they have the wherewithal to run without. These are my comments and recommendation. I want to thank you for listening, and apology that slide is not available. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
For your presentation. So now we have still opportunity for some questions or comments from our audience. Yes, please.
To all the speakers.
To all the speakers, yes, Professor Luigi Crema. Yes, please come in. Come here.
Let's say before opening the floor to everybody, I'll ask to Olenka a quick question on. So, what's your take? Why are the only BIT effectively enforced for Nigeria belonging to the first generation, so early 90s with the Global North, basically, and the new, more refined treaties signed also with partners that do not come from the Global North, such as Morocco or the Emirates, are not enforced. So I have this curiosity. Why is your government not committing to the most sophisticated way to import the capitals and investments, but is still sticking to the simplified cooperation of the roaring but gone and unfair 90s? If you have any political opinion on this, thank you.
Thank you for that contribution, though the question is not very clear, but I had bilateral investment treaties and the political opinion concerning this. And what I have in respect of this is Africa presently is not is not well on what kind of the economy it wants to pursue and the manner of development it wants to attain. So, but importantly, these bilateral investment treaties that, as it occurs to me, you have to, the equality status, I want to say, is very, very important in what kind of relationship that countries, particularly in Africa, have to enter into, because what we have presently are imposed relationship. We have a new head of state now, and there are calls that are made to him either to maintain bilateral treaties that are on ground or to lure him into signing other ones. But for Africa, importantly for Africa is the fact that Africa should first realize its own status. It should first realize itself before it be looking at in terms of a relationship, trade relationship with other particularly developed economies. So it's very, very important. Pre-colonial Africa was purely reliant and was progress at that level because things are going on slowly, and no nation was borrowing from any, no community was borrowing, everybody self-reliant and self-sufficient, and the progress was with members of the community. But with these bilateral investment treaties and global fissioning, it has not been doing fine with Africa, because it has not been doing well with us. We have even agents of the developed economies that are making things difficult in Africa, and Africa is not seem not to be its own political situation now, and the way it wants to make progress. If this one does not really satisfy, because I didn't hear the questions.
It's okay. It's a curiosity, you know, because, you know, there's always tension between the global north and the global south when you have a treaty between Jamaica and Nigeria that was signed a few years ago but never entered into force. So I was wondering whether there are specific reasons. Thank you. I leave the floor and the mic to whoever wants to be.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, shit.
Well, thank you, Attila, for your presentation. It was really interesting. And my question relates to one of your conclusions, and it's out of my own ignorance on this topic. But you argued that it seems like the Chinese model is going to be of governance is going to be imposed in Afghanistan. And my question would be, how do you think this can be achieved according to the specific circumstances or differences between the Chinese model and the conditions that prevail in Afghanistan, especially in this post-conflict situation that we're currently seeing happening? So that would be my question, if you could clarify this point, please. Thank you.
So yeah, thank you for the question. It's also kind of more of a question for me and the global society. It's not that I'm claiming that it's going to be imposed, because it is the third try, let's say the big try of imposing any kind of a system over to Afghanistan. And my conclusion is more going towards that these things are rather failing in some sense. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I cannot now define why exactly and how they can be fixed. But obviously there is something what is different between these post-conflict societies. So, for example, from some societies, refugees will be coming to Europe in any case, and from some they will not be coming to Europe. Some societies are like China is a communist country, whether you cannot really find a country which is more developing than China. Okay, they're having their ups and downs. So yeah, I'm not claiming that it's going to be that Afghanistan is going to become a communist country, if you can say, after all, that China is a communist country. Thank you.
Any other for Luigi or Terry?
Yeah, maybe why don't we use this opportunity also to ask a little bit more Professor Luigi Crema about Tunisia, because I'm not so familiar with the overall macroeconomic situation in Tunisia, but isn't it that Tunisia suffered immensely during the pandemic because of lack of tourism, which obviously rapidly deteriorated the macroeconomic situation? This is one question. The one aspect of the Tunisia macroeconomic framework, and another one is Tunisia has real difficulty in access to the European market in agriculture, even though there is a high quality of agriculture production in Tunisia, for example, in olives, but they cannot enter, so there is a lot of repackaging, I think, from Tunisia to first Southern Europe and then from Southern Europe to Europe. Isn't this one of the instances? So why not? I was thinking when you mentioned conditionality, I was thinking maybe more should be on offer to Tunisia in terms of providing more prospects of advancement in agriculture, in tourism, in small entrepreneurship, because of young talented population in Tunisia, educated. There is a huge potential of Tunisia in renewables, in solar energy, for example. So I see a lot of developmental prospects of Tunisia that maybe it is not somehow incorporated in the conditionality, very technocratic approach by the IMF, and maybe this is what is, slowly, gradually, actually turning away many of the developing countries against advice or conditionality from the IMF. So I don't see very many success stories in the history of the IMF and the World Bank, actually, in the last 70 years. So whenever they get involved in many parts of Mediterranean, Sub-Saharan, Latin American countries, we don't see many success stories there. So maybe this is the background context that actually creates not much hope or trust toward the Bretton Woods system as it is in place without being reformed itself. And the proximity to the European markets with so many obstacles, visible and invisible, toward the European markets, maybe create this huge gap between the potential of Tunisia and the actual developments of Tunisia that make their economic, social, and also democratic transition so much more difficult. So I'm saying in the broader context of the Arab Spring, when there was this huge energy, enthusiasm of young people throughout the region, that we somehow abandoned them, their hopes, their aspirations, and maybe the obstacles, the barriers erected by the so-called fortress of Europe simply do not help prospects of these countries. So we are liberalizing internally, but we are erecting too many barriers to the countries in the wider neighborhood, and this creates more divides. And how to overcome this, I think this should be also factored in. So we should not count on these countries only as a barrier or hub for keeping refugees migrants out of the European Union, when these attempts were made recently by some of the European countries, as I'm sure you're very well aware of. So what would be your comments on this?
Thank you, Matjaž, for the question. Yeah, the microphone is on. So aside from the data, and I will read them. So the situation in Tunisia and in other countries in the Mediterranean calls not just for a legal perspective. I'm a professor of law. After all, lawyers dealt with huge political struggles. So maybe it's time, first of all, that in the academy, political struggles become part of positive law classes too. And that's what I'm trying to do with this presentation. And in general, I try to do in my class. So this is my first point. And having said so, I will deal with a few facts that regards Italy, Europe, France, Tunisia, Morocco. So in 2011, the most developed country in the north of the African continent, that is Libya, struck a deal with Italy for 11 billions. It was, of course, a way to bring money to Libya, but through Libya to bring it to Italian companies, because within the EU, you cannot have state aid. And therefore, when you are dealing, 2011 is just during the recovery phase after the first huge financial crisis that hit Europe and the West in 2008. That was kind of a scheme to bring fresh currency in our developed industrial system. France and the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State, decided to invade Libya because of the Arab Springs and the need to bring a fresh air into that country. To the point, the alliance between France and Italy, EU founders, is so strong that France invaded Libya against the deal signed by Italy, but did not even share any info collected by their secret agencies, the intelligence. Just to give you an example of how deep is the division that certain countries still keep. So if this is the kind of division that there is between France and Italy in a moment of recovery, 2011, what is the possibility for Europe to bring stability into the Mediterranean when the 6th Fleet of the US Navy decided to leave the Mediterranean Sea to bring it into a more problematic chessboard of the Pacific and leaving unguarded the Mediterranean Sea? We didn't bring any boat there. We did not start any operation, and we had to deal with the massive influx of people through the Mediterranean Sea in the years 2011, 2015, through Frontex. If I'm not wrong, forgive me, those are now 10 years. In 2014, the Frontex budget on the year base was 90 millions put by the EU Commission. And Italy alone had something like 60 millions per month in the army and the navy displaced in the area. So we're talking about a joke. Okay, this is not the European cooperation we dreamed of, and it's not the European cooperation we are dreaming of when we teach in class. So then Tunisia comes into play after 12 years of this kind of cooperation, that is a non-cooperation. Tunisia has a huge problem, as you said, because of the lack of tourism. Tunisia doesn't have oil and gas, so it's different from Libya, and it's different from many other Arabic countries. So there is a shortage in the reserves. The amount of foreign currency within the Tunisian central bank dropped to 3 billion in the last year. Okay, so they're using their currencies to keep up with payments. The situation is not good, and we go back then to why people are knocking the door of the IMF, because they need it, not because they're happy with their situation. So what do we do next? Okay, what do we do next? Italy brought 700 million last week, or 2 weeks ago. The president of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, went because of the impasse and because of the Chinese attempt to bring the money. So Italy had a private visit, the Italian government, and brought 700 million. It's not 1.9 billion, but still good, more than 30% of that amount. And Nigeria also, and Algeria brought some money, because there is with the resources falling short, there is the risk of a default and the possible anarchy coming out. So we need the IMF or not? What are the good recipes of the IMF? The IMF alone without a compact EU or a compact West, it's nothing. We have the example, we just quoted it, of Kosovo. What happened in Kosovo after good 2008, let's say, stable, 2008 stable. So 2008, 15 years of stability with the West coordinating efforts, both financially and industrially. Is Kosovo taking off? So imagine if you remove also the Navy of the US and you don't replace it in front of it. Of course, the forces pushing on the Tunisian society are free to be the most different, as it's happening in a more dramatic way in Libya. So no, there's no future for any possible financial intervention that doesn't include a strong military and political commitment by the Western countries in the area. So the future is Libya. If you know, we have a clear picture, so we don't have to imagine too much. It means Russia getting in with the Wagner, destabilizing, blowing on something that we destabilized first in Libya. Tunisia will be just up for grab to be destabilized, as happened to Libya. So we don't want that, of course. I'm just being a bit grim, but so we have to be a bit more serious. And I give you the last example of just to go back to your question about agriculture. Don't touch agriculture to the EU. That's the only real political tool used at the moment, not the strong political tool. There is a huge budget on that. So it's likely not to be touched in the future. So what can we do about the situation? And I don't know. I'm not very happy about these politicians. So I close with an even more dim image. When Ukraine was invaded by Russia, everybody was kind of surprised and shocked because we didn't want to see a war of occupation. There are many wars in the world, unfortunately. Super nasty one in Yemen and Arabia was at its peak moment back then. So we knew how nasty war is. But this is a war of occupation. It's something we thought we left in the 19th century, you know, horses and knights and taking, you know, the Rhine region between Germany and France. No, so annexation was still a topic. All European leaders gathered in Versailles, very important place for European self-consciousness, and they came out all together. Good politicians after such meeting, all European leaders, the whole EU, you would expect, we have an idea, we have a roadmap, we can make progress, we're going to bring peace. No, they had the picture hugging each other in line, proclaiming, we approve the package of sanctions. Who the heck cares if you approve the package of, you know, we are talking about the invasion of a country, we're talking about war and peace, about stability. If the middle class of Russia won't have Louis Vuitton bags, we don't care, okay? You're politicians, you should do something more than approving sanctions. We're all happy to strike Renault out of Moscow streets. Is that the answer that provided between 2011 and 2022 anything to North Africa? No. And we're trying again with Russia. We will succeed for sure. It's just went very badly for a year. We were unlucky. So unless we understand